if you were to stab a person wearing armor with a spear,
probably pretty hard to do.
Yeah, best case scenario, it's going to get in there like an inch, right?
And now it's just kind of stuck in there.
It's stuck in there, and then that's
not fun.
Then there's like a 5-minute sort of gruesome struggle where you're trying to get it out of there.
Nobody's having a good time.
That's not good gameplay.
Especially the person with the spear in the chest.
They're just like, ow, stop it.
Butterscotch.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 165 of Coffee with Butterscotch, the game dev comedy podcast, Butterscotch Shenanigans. I'm Seth, and I'm the games programmer.
I'm Adam, and I'm the biter of bits.
I'm Sam, and I'm the vector artist.
And this is a show where we talk about life, business, and working in the games industry. Today is August 20, 2018. Before we started, we have a warning. Anything can happen on this show. There's going to be profanity.
Tons of it.
Yep.
And then there's going to be other stuff that, as we discussed last week, children should just get in on because they need to learn.
Grow up a little bit.
You need to grow up and learn.
I'm also a little bit concerned because, Seth, you kicked us off, and it sounded like you might have forgotten what your role was. And then you followed it up with a completely normal date, which makes me wonder.
Have you been replaced?
Are you, Seth?
Don't worry about it.
Are we being doppelgonged?
Don't worry about
it.
No, the thing is, normally I have the document that I use for reference at a slightly different zoom level.
Oh.
And so I'm just really disoriented right now.
Thrown off.
That'll happen.
Yeah. Also, before we get started, we want to thank our Ko-Fi supporters from moneygrab.bscotch.net. We want to thank Killer Procol, who says, please don't get rid of your podcast. I love how you talk about life and the gaming community. Plus, you guys are hilarious and seen.
All it takes is $4, apparently, to keep our podcast live.
That's right. We also got a message from My Name is Optional, who said, this is my message of support. And then we got another one from Devin Smith. This is my real message of support. So I don't know if there was a crossed wire there or if Devin just went in twice.
Sometimes you got to go in twice.
Yeah. And also we have a number of recurring supporters who we would like to thank who pledge monthly, which is fantastic. Helps keeps the lights on, helps keeps the mics on.
And we did cross, I think last episode or 2 episodes ago, we had over 1,500 listens. According to the SoundCloud.
Oh, did we?
It's pretty rad.
So,
yeah. We had like 2 weeks in a row. So I don't know what's going on, but hey.
We did try some advertising on overcast.fm.
That might have
that'll probably do it.
Maybe that did it. But it wasn't very much advertising, so.
I don't know.
So I don't know.
We just did one.
We did one advertising.
One advertising, which gets us 0.03 people.
Yep.
Yes.
So, it builds.
Yeah.
It builds over time. All right, let's get on to the news from this week. First thing, so I streamed over this weekend over at twitch.tv/bscotch.
But how much screaming did you do?
6.
It's pretty good.
But here's the kicker. So we've talked in the past about podcasting and about consistency.
Yeah.
And how there was a time where after Crashlands launched, all of a sudden our number of listens spiked up to like 3,000 per episode. Then some shit happened because we got busy with the launch and everything.
Yeah, I think we skipped 4 weeks in a row or something like that.
In a row?
Wasn't it? It was like two or 4
we
weeks
skipped
in
a
row.
couple.
We skipped 4 episodes, I think, in total over like 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Because things were just wild.
Okay. Yeah, because it was at least 2 in a row.
It was
at
real.
least once.
Yeah.
It was real touch and go.
And then we lost 2/3 of our listeners who then never came back, right?
I think each week we skipped, we lost like a third of what was there now.
Yes. And we've heard this from, we listened to My Brother and Me, which is a comedy podcast. And they made some comment where, they have millions of listeners and they missed 1 week, and they lost a third of their listeners. There's people who just don't come back. And I think it's that people come to depend on the consistency of it. It becomes part of their routine, right? So what you have to recognize is that if you break your routine, then you break their routine.
But I gotta say, it is crazy how fragile that is, though.
Oh yeah,
because what is it? What mechanism are people using? Because I'm just using my whatever the podcast app thingy, whatever the hell it's called. It just knows like when things are out, so I just open it up and I listen to some podcasts. Like if somebody missed a week, it wouldn't impact me at all because it would just be the next week.
It would just appear.
Here's the one you haven't listened to yet.
I don't know what mechanism. Some people maybe do it manually.
Yeah, maybe, but then you would have to then just suddenly forget that podcast existed now because it wasn't there 1 week. You'd have to.
I think it's just the sort of thing where if it misses once, then you're like, is it ever gonna come back. You know,
so there's there's an object permanence problem here.
Yeah,
but I mean,
did this ever exist?
Well, but they don't come out every day because the thing that's weird to me is the fact that it's weekly. So because almost every podcast comes out once a week ish or something like that. So it's actually long enough away that seems like plenty of time to forget about it, right? Mm-hmm. Versus if you miss one episode, that's only 2 weeks. You know, it's really the same time scale. Mm-hmm. But for some reason,
I don't know. I think people just really value consistency.
Yeah,
and if you miss it, then people start to think. And I went through my podcast apps over this past weekend to grab some new stuff and purge old stuff. And basically anything that hadn't put out an episode in a couple of weeks, I just unsubscribed from because I wanted to get stuff that was going to be pumping out content on a reliable basis so that I can sort of predict my listening time over commutes and stuff so I don't have a huge backlog or so that I don't run out. And if somebody's pumping out episodes sort of randomly or maybe like once a month or something, then I just can't really.
So I guess the idea is
work it in.
So if you have like a podcast or a small number of podcasts that you listen to, but you depend on them because you use them for your commute or something.
It's part of my routine.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. Then if one of them is gone, you got to replace it.
Right.
And then if you've replaced it, then you just got to.
Then I'm on a different train now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we missed.
So not a lot of loyalty involved, I guess, with this process.
Well, no, you got to think of it. Loyalty has to go both ways.
No, and I get that,
right?
but again, it's you miss a week. That's the thing that the part of this whole picture.
No, but I think
it's absurd.
To me, it's a beautiful lesson in the value of consistency. Because we've talked about practice a lot, right? What's the problem with missing one day of practice, or whatever else?
Is it now you miss the next day?
Yeah, because it's not just about that day. It's about the fact that you've now you have to fill it with something. And so your routine's going to be changed completely. So I've experienced this last week while we've been working up to all of our pack stuff. And it's been the case that because I've been coming into the office right when I get up, as opposed to doing like an hour of art in the morning, that getting back into the art train has taken 10 days or so, as opposed to just being the thing that I do every single morning.
Yeah, people have a lot of inertia to their behaviors.
But I do. So I get all this. I don't disagree with anything. But I'm speaking my own perspective. There are a handful of podcasts I like, a very, very small number, right? So if one of them was like just wasn't there one week, I'd be a little annoyed, maybe, if I noticed, but then would be excited when it was back the next week, right? So I have a bunch of podcasts that come out in seasons. And so they're just sitting in my thing waiting for the next season to start, which could be months later, But it's like, these are a handful of podcasts that I actually like because most of them aren't very good, being honest. So,
well, that's
but
fine,
the thing that you would be like, say you love, I don't know, whatever, just some really popular podcast. You just love it, right? And then one week it's not there. And you're like, well, this is completely interchangeable with another podcast. So I'll just now have this one.
Well, I think that's an assumption.
I don't understand what is happening.
No, it's an assumption you're making, which is you said it's a podcast that you really love and depend on.
But so the idea
can't be true of
so the idea is a third of all people don't actually give a fuck about the podcast.
They're just filling the time. They just need something to listen to.
Yeah, that's probably true.
And they want, and they're maybe like they're kind of bouncing in and out, and they're like, "Oh, this is fine, I guess." And they're filling it. They're filling the time with it. And then as soon as you miss it, they're like, "Yeah, I'll fill this with something."
So, is an alternative interpretation of what has happened.
It's kind of like pruning the newsletter.
Exactly. Is that by missing episodes, we actually purify our audience.
We make sure we only keep the best.
Yeah.
The most committed.
I don't know. There's this interesting sort of, I think, problem that a lot of content creators have with this issue of slipping into irrelevancy that can happen really quickly with something like this, because it's a very uncomfortable feeling to know that if you're like, hey, we just missed a week, that if a third of the people who you built up were just like, well, I'm out. It's like, I know you've done this for 160 hours and I've enjoyed a lot of it, but I can't have someone in my life who just skips a week.
Yeah.
It's just unacceptable.
Yeah. And you're like, listen, you've been consistent for 50 weeks in a row, but I need somebody dependable. And you missed the most recent one.
It's interesting. And I think your point about that going both ways, it is weird to recognize the responsibility as a content creator that you actually do have in terms of the way that someone else is building their daily life or routines.
Yeah.
Because
I agree with all.
I'm not saying talk about your stuff. I'm just saying, like,
crazy.
As a general, it's a weird.
Well, so then bringing it back to the stream, what happened was, we were gone last weekend, so I couldn't stream. Streaming is live, which means unlike the podcast where we can know we're going to be gone and then pre-record it, I can't pre-record a stream. Either I set aside the time, or if something happens like we're at a wedding.
You could.
Well, no, because most of what people watch for the stream is actually the interaction.
Yeah.
You could just every once in a while just say things as if you're interacting with people.
I'll put a laugh track in and some like sensible chuckles.
Well, but also because the way that Twitch works, you can't once you come into the chat, you can't see the backlog, right? You only see from where you come in.
But when you
can just talk as if you're reading stuff that happened a long time ago.
I don't think that's going to pan out.
I think all you're talking about is putting a video on YouTube instead of putting it on Twitch.
Yeah. But you got to go where your audience is.
Yeah. So what happened then was I streamed for 5 weeks straight on Saturday mornings, and the viewer count was going up and up and up each time. And then missed 1 week, came back, lost half.
Yep.
Just 50% gone. Mm-hmm. So now I got to build it back.
This is the main reason. I keep on thinking I want to stream some web dev or something like that. But the main reason I'm hesitant to do it and probably won't is exactly that, which is that it is completely pointless unless you're going to build
unless you go really all in.
Yeah, and you got to commit and just say like I'm literally going to. This is part of my life routine. Is that every week, no matter what's happening, come hell or high water, I'm going to sit down for X hours at exactly this time, and I'm going to stream. And I'm not ready for that kind of commitment. What I'm looking at, it's way more serious than marriage, than buying a house.
It's a huge commitment.
It's enormous.
You can get out of those other things, but you can't get out of streaming.
No.
Once you're in, you're in.
Forever.
But I mean, I look at it as I have this fun side project that I want to work on, and this just gives me a sort of like a forced routine to work on this thing. So while also hanging out with our people, which is great. So anyway, just an interesting note. Anybody considering getting into podcasting, streaming, being a YouTuber, whatever it is, aside from trying to be good at it, making sure you have good equipment.
Consistency is key.
If you're not consistent, nothing else matters. So also we have a new Levelhead subreddit. We are going to be launching a Levelhead announcement trailer soon. And we realized, hey, where will we send people?
I guess we could probably tell people when the trailer's coming out, couldn't we?
No.
Okay.
Later.
No, just in case something goes sideways, but we're keeping it under wraps.
Well, that's fair.
So there will be a trailer soon. And then we also realized that, and this is part of the marketing question of giving people a call to action, giving people something to participate in or something to do. And so we looked at our current status and we said, well, we could send people to the Discord, but that's kind of transient in the sense that there's just like one stream of chat.
And it's not about Levelhead.
Yeah, it's our community Discord just kind of appeared. There's a Levelhead channel, but and so we spun up a Levelhead subreddit, which is now at reddit.com/r/Levelhead, as one might expect.
There's just tons of GIFs and stuff in there. So if you guys want to pop in and see essentially what the game is doing, what are some of the other pieces that maybe you missed, or even that you just haven't seen before, it's just sort of all collected there now.
Yeah, and if you
want a lot of stuff we've talked about on the podcast, now you can just actually see.
Yeah,
instead of having to imagine it.
Yeah, if you want to ask any questions about the game or even express concerns about, if you're saying like, I've played other games like this and here's some things I hated, is Levelhead going to have those? And we'll be like, yeah,
probably.
But at least then you'll know.
And a lot of the design choices we made came out of some of the subreddits we were looking at months ago.
Yeah.
When we were looking at what people wish that existed in things like Mario Maker or other kinds of things. So, we're going to pay attention to it.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I mean, at the end of the day, who's the game for? It's for the people playing it. So we should probably see what they need. So that's there.
But
and
we're not going to make it an MMO no matter what anybody says.
Yeah. What they need, not what they want.
Yeah.
We're not going to give people what they want. That's ridiculous. All right. Also, Google is doing some research on how people get games.
They wanted to talk to our community in particular because of Crashlands and the success that it's had. So if you've ever wanted to talk to someone who is interested in listening about how you get your games, or in our case, how you found Crashlands.
It's basically a therapy session just around games.
Yeah. It's like a 20-minute, I think 20 or 30-minute call, and we have an bit.ly set up. So you go to bit.ly/player interview, and that's where the form is that they've put up. And all this is handled by them, so we don't actually touch the data or anything like that. It's all their stuff.
It's not ours. We won't know anything you say in there.
All anonymized, all that stuff.
Yeah,
but they're basically just trying to figure out how outside of something like the store do people actually go find their games? Who do they listen to? How do things spread from friends and family, that sort of thing. So if you want to talk about finding Crashlands or any of the other games in our portfolio, go sign up for it. They need about, I think, 10 more people or so. We've already gotten a few from the Discord, so feel free to hop in there. Again, it's bit.ly/playerinterview.
Yes. All right, on to industry news. Steam accidentally launched a Twitch competitor.
Yeah. Did you guys see this happen? It was on Saturday.
No.
What?
So they accidentally put up Steam.tv.
What do you mean accidentally?
Like they literally accidentally put it up and then took it down.
Oh, they went prematurely live.
Yes. And it's apparently going to be used to stream the Dota International Tournament. So for those not familiar, Dota is just this gigantic online game that has a huge tournament that has like $1 million prize pool.
I think Steam still makes I don't know if most, but a huge fraction of their income off of Dota and TF2.
Yeah, and Counter-Strike.
But
yeah, so they basically put this thing up, and then it's very clear that it literally is like a Twitch competitor. I mean, it has the chat, has streaming chat, all this other stuff, and then they took it down within like 10 minutes or something. And so everybody ran articles about it. So, Kotaku.
Man, can you imagine being in a company where, because like we make fuck ups all the time.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That sometimes lasts for like 2 days
or more
before we are like, oh God, and then we fix it. Can you imagine having so many people watching what you're doing that if you make a mistake and fix it within 10 minutes, then still everybody notices and there's news articles for weeks about it.
Yeah.
And if you're a public company, like now all of a sudden your stock prices.
Like all you getting fired. Yeah, you got to fire people. Oh God, it's the whole thing.
It's wild. So yeah, that happened. I don't know what that means. I just don't know what's going on because it was weird because Steam was just doing its thing, and then now it's
doing some other things.
Now it was like Discord for a while. Now apparently it's like Twitch. Discord's like Steam.
Honestly,
I don't know what's happening.
What I think is happening is maybe Valve is feeling some pressure.
Yeah, maybe.
They've been just kind of sitting on their laurels for
they've been sitting for just a really long time. Like the slumbering beast is waking up, and it's like, oh God, the gaming landscape is dramatically changing, and we forgot about that fact.
I mean, if Valve really went for it,
if they applied all their know-how and resources to stuff
and scaled up, I mean, using their infinite resources, if they scaled up their, and I mean, they do have an enormous web team and a lot of infrastructure because they actually handle. For anybody who doesn't develop on Steam, you actually can opt into using their infrastructure for multiplayer and stuff. So they have just huge infrastructure, and they got a lot of smart people over there. It's a company that people want to work for. So if they really wanted to do it,
they could do some big things.
Do it. And they're not unlike, say, like Amazon, which is kind of doing the same sort of stuff. But Amazon doesn't care about games. It's a company about shipping products, right? And you take like Twitch. Twitch cares about games, but it's all this it's a completely different kind of dynamic. It's not about people selling games or whatever. So all these everybody has kind of a different perspective on it. But Valve is the one who just is 100% all about like getting games to people, getting people excited about it, and has been for a long time.
Yeah, it was always weird to me because they also had for a long time they've had that ability to stream games to your friends.
Yes,
you can watch your friends play, and then recently they've added now people can stream as developers. Can players stream just generally over Steam?
Not yet. I think this is what that would basically allow for, right?
Yeah, so like they've had all this technology, and then in the meantime, companies like Discord have popped up, companies like Twitch have popped up. And are doing all these things that Valve totally could be doing and just isn't.
It's kind of reminiscent of Microsoft, where they just held the lead for so long that they lost it. And of course, in business and elsewhere, I mean, they still have the dominant market share, right? But it's no longer one where just the assumption is if you talk to a human being, they have Windows, right? Actually, for the most part, now if I talk to somebody my own age, I assume that they have a Mac.
Well, and if you think about the fact that so much of computing and so much of the way people interact with technology has now shifted over to handhelds. Yeah. And Microsoft just flat out lost that whole whole battle.
Well, and they just didn't even try.
Yeah, like maybe 8 years later they're like, we have a Windows phone, and everybody's like, no.
Because like everyone the weird thing about that one was that everyone recognized that it was a beautiful piece of software.
Oh yeah, and it was basically running Windows 10.
Yeah, like one of my friends had one, and it was like the phone experience was actually phenomenal on that thing.
It was a great phone,
but it was just too
people were entrenched, and people's thinking. I feel like as soon as you have two dominant players, where people when they talk about it, it's like, oh, you got a new phone, are you going to get an Apple or an Android, right? Yeah. Like that's how the conversation goes. And once you have these two huge players in the market, then you're not only competing for things like shelf space, you're competing for like culture.
Yeah.
Like just the way that people talk about these kinds of things.
You're basically just not a part of the culture, Because part of the culture is the competition,
Yeah.
But if you're
the rivalry, yeah.
Yeah.
People love having two sides, like an us or them thing.
But people also love underdogs, but you can't be Microsoft and an underdog. Right. Right. That doesn't work that way.
Which is why I am considering getting a BlackBerry.
Which I guess it still exists
in like a year.
It turns out.
Yeah, they've got a new.
Are they running Android now?
They're running Android now. Yeah, which
it has a keyboard. That's the whole thing. It's got
a physical keyboard. Yeah,
Yeah.
every time somebody sends me a text message on my Android phone, my flat pane of glass Android phone, I get mad. I get mad about the fact that now I have to type. Because like if they had sent me an email, I'm like, no problem. I'll deal with this
later.
When I get to a keyboard. As soon as I get a text, I'm like, I hate.
But here's where you went wrong: is you're not using Google Voice for everything.
That's true.
Because that's how I answer text mostly.
So you just talking to it?
I just type on my computer because Google Voice you can get on your.
Oh, you could also just hit the button on there and just talk to your phone, and it'll convert it into text.
How good does it do? I haven't even tried
It is all right.
Yeah, but that's also weird. I don't know if I'm old fashioned about this, but I'm not really that into voice tech. Like when I talk to my phone, I don't know.
Well, because it changes the nature from being a private activity.
Now,
Let me take this text message.
It's like when you see somebody walking around doing that Kardashian thing where they have their phone on speaker and they're holding it up in front of their face like it's a microphone and they're on camera,
Yeah.
Please stop.
I mean, I guess technically it is a microphone, but you know what I mean? Like they're being
It's also a
interviewed.
camera.
And probably they're on camera at the same time.
Yeah, it's also shit. It is a camera. Yeah, but I mean, I like the physical keyboard, and then BlackBerry is coming out with they have the Key 2 or whatever, and apparently it's pretty decent. So I don't know. I may check that out.
I have been contemplating downgrading just to something like cheaper, shittier. I just don't like.
Did you see the light phone?
Can you get flip phones still?
Yeah, you can get flip
Oh,
phones.
sweet.
Did you see the light phone?
No, is it just light?
It's the size of a credit card. There was a Kickstarter.
Oh, I did
for it.
see this. Yeah.
And it actually
Except it was really expensive.
well,
It basically can't do.
it's actually
anything,
it's actually an accessory to your normal phone.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So
I hate everything about this.
So what it does is it has no screen and it's like totally blank, and like when you touch it, then the keys turn on. But then it only has numbers, and then it will forward calls from your phone, and that's all it does. So it's just a phone. So if you want to just have a phone, but then still have all the modern conveniences of having a smartphone, I don't know. It's a weird middle
It's kind of
ground.
like an Apple Watch.
I
Right?
feel like if
you
you're
gotta
going to be a Luddite, you got to commit.
Yeah.
Indeed.
You know,
And it's not even that I want to be a Luddite. I just want to have less. I just want less.
you just want to have less, fewer distractions and nonsense.
just less.
Just less.
You
Just
know?
have
Of
less.
everything.
Yeah, that's just too much.
Yeah. Also, speaking of Kickstarters, Boyfriend Dungeon.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know how many of our listeners have heard of this before. Hilarious.
All right, so we have friends over at Kit Fox Games.
Mhm. They started, I don't know if they started around the same time as this, but they launched a game called Shattered Planet around the same time that Quadrupus Rampage launched, which is our second game. And then since then, we met them at some conventions and stuff. And Tanya Short is their studio head who gives a bunch of talks and that sort of thing. And
Tanya's great.
yeah, they're all fantastic people, and they've been churning out. I think they've made like probably 6 or 7 games at
I
this
think
point.
Moon Hunters was the most
Moon Hunters was
last one.
Well, I think that another one which is like a cult simulation game of some sort,
okay.
which is also really cool. Had like a green sort of Game Boy style aesthetic. I believe that was theirs as well. And so yeah, they've done a bunch of cool projects, and they've also done Kickstarter before. And so this game Boyfriend Dungeon, apparently, so Tanya had put out a tweet about it last week as well after it was successfully kickstarted in like 7 hours. Okay, so they raised, I think it was $50,000 in like 7 hours or so using Kickstarter. And the whole premise of the game, they call it a shack and slash, which I think is hysterical.
Yeah,
nice. What it is, you dive into dungeons, you fight monsters and stuff, and then you occasionally come across these big chests that have these weapons in them. And you grab the weapon, but the trick is that the weapon's not just a weapon, it's also
Your boyfriend.
your boyfriend. And so you can date some ways, basically once you get out of
or
the dungeon.
girlfriend. I think it started as Boyfriend Dungeon, and then they were like, well, we should just make this for everybody.
Oh, yeah,
So now it's like,
You got everything in it.
Yeah.
So the best part about it is the weapon, once you get out of the dungeon, transforms into some
just
Beautiful
just
human
luscious
lush
man
person of some
or-
sort. And then it's a dating sim. And then I'm not sure how it works as far as, how abilities unlock, whatever else. But apparently it's everyone's loving it.
Something about how you romance your weapon outside
Somehow
of the
translates
dungeon.
into the dungeon.
Somehow, translates into your skills.
And they also unveiled, they had a cat that they unveiled, which you can't romance but if it likes you enough, then it'll come with. It turns into brass knuckles.
Yeah, and so all the boyfriends and slash girlfriends slash significant others, whatever, they've got some kind of personality that somehow reflects their weapon type, and like when they turn into a weapon, then it kind of like matches their general clothes and motif and stuff. Yeah.
So they did already successfully fund it, but it's one of those goofy things that I think is just very interesting.
It just probably should exist.
Yeah, and it's fun. So if you're interested in it, they are on Kickstarter. Just search for Boyfriend Dungeon. You'll find it. It's hysterical.
Yes. I'm excited about this. All right. And last but not least, a little bit of life news. We saw the movie. Well, I guess it's not our lives, but we saw a movie, Crazy Rich Asians.
Yeah.
It's the movie. Came out. Let's talk about it. Sam, you just went to China, and a lot of the movies about Chinese culture.
Yeah. So what was fun, because actually it was very interesting, because the big splash of this movie is making is the fact that the cast is all of Asian descent in some way. So whether that's half or from Malaysia or whatever else. So just all over the Asian continent. And then it's a rom-com, and it's phenomenally done. So it's great. It's just a really good. It's because I've watched quite a few, because my wife loves them, of course, and so I feel like I'm somewhat of a connoisseur at this point of rom-coms.
I mean, you have watched a few of them, so
I've watched a good many, and it's very much a.
And you've watched The Bachelor, which basically every episode is like
So it's a very good movie, just on its own merits. It's a really good movie by itself. But the thing that's really interesting about it is, it's this sort of lens into the whole story. Involves someone from the U.S. falling in love with this guy from Singapore, who turns out to be like sort of the Bachelor of Singapore, essentially, a very wealthy family. And then they go back to meet his family. And it's sort of like that cultural clash between the Singapore family, between this woman who was born in the States, or was moved to the States when she was very young as an immigrant, and just like a really interesting sort of look at what that culture looks like in those.
Yeah, and there's also stuff about like intergenerational clashes, because times change, culture changes, people change, and it always causes interesting conflicts, and that expresses itself in different ways depending on traditions and depending on culture and expectations and stuff. So it's a great movie.
Well, my wife loved it because we started watching it, and the whole point, again, like the reason it's making it a big splash is because of this idea of inclusion, right? So it's been a long time. Apparently, Joy Luck Club, like 40 years ago, was the last time that there was an all Asian cast for something
from Hollywood.
Yeah. And that was like a really sad movie, apparently, that not a lot of people saw at the end of the day. And so this, like, we start watching it, and the song comes on, and it's a Chinese song. I think it's like a Chinese jazz song. And Dinah just started crying. Like in the first 15 seconds, my wife had started crying and she didn't realize, she was like, I didn't know that this was going to be emotional, just to hear this song that she knew in a Hollywood blockbuster movie to start with. And so it was a really interesting thing to be there and to be able to experience that alongside her in particular, who got to see, her own face reflected on the screen in a really big way, which is really cool. So inclusion matters. It was fun. It's a very good movie. Go check it out.
Yeah. And it's killing it in the box office, as I understand. So, all right, let's get on some questions. These questions come from our listeners over at podcast.bscotch.net. So if you'd like to get your question on a future episode, get over there, put your question in the text box. First question comes from Anonymous. Hey guys, love the podcast. And just to clarify, it was I who sent you that book.
So, very funny.
So last episode, we talked about how we got a book, 5000 BC. No idea who it was from. Now we know.
It was anonymous.
Yeah, we know.
Writer of many questions.
Next question comes from, thanks for the book. Next question comes from CoffeeChemist. So now that the Shenanigans Jam is done and gone, I'm super curious. What goes into a jam on your end?
Running a jam.
Yeah. If you want to run a jam, what do you do? First, you got to tape up your nipples.
Because there'll be a lot of
it's going to chafe. It's going to chafe.
It's a long run.
It's a long marathon. A lot of movement.
I think it all depends on the level of, I guess, the depth of the involvement that you want to have with the jam. That's sort of the first
question: is this only for everybody else, or is it also for you?
Yes. So when it comes, like, you can have that sort of thing happen where, if you throw a party, you actually are usually the one having the least fun time at the party, because you have to organize stuff. You want to make sure everyone's having a good time, make sure the music's good, make sure food's out, everyone's got drinks in their hands. And so you're just thinking about all these things. And you can throw a really good party that's great for everyone, and then also not really get much out of it yourself in that same sort of way that they would. And a lot of that pleasure then comes from just giving that to someone else, that experience to someone else. So I think in a jam context, deciding what your level of involvement actually is because of what you want to do is really important. So if you just want to put on a really, really slick community event and you don't mind not participating yourself, then you could do a little bit more. Mm-hmm. But otherwise, we in our case with the Shenanigans Jam, the reason it's set up the way it is so that we can participate.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, if it was a real-time location sort of thing, then we would not be able to build a game probably because there's a ton of work that goes into that. So,
well, unless we spent a lot of money, because then we hire other people to handle that for us, right? Or if you have a volunteer organization. So locally, we have the St. Louis Co-op, Game Dev Co-op, and it's a volunteer group. It's all nonprofit stuff, and so they'll spend money that the group has raised to get a venue, or the venue will just donate, a space or whatever, and then people will volunteer enough time that people don't necessarily have to get paid.
Right.
But you still have to seek sponsors. You still have to do a whole bunch of stuff. So there's an enormous amount of time that goes into doing that kind of thing.
And actually, because of that fact, the St. Louis game dev community used to have 3 jams a year that were like pretty big events. They were like, it was a whole weekend event. Now we're down to 1, which is the Global Game Jam, that as far as like that whole 48 hour in one location style. And then there's the Scattered Jam in the fall, which is the more streamlined, everybody shows up, gets the theme, and then they all scatter and go back to their houses or whatever, and then come back at the end. So it just was so much work that the organizers just couldn't keep up with it, which rightly so. I mean, and they're doing it all for free. And then they don't even get to participate in the jam because they're too busy sweating bullets the whole time.
So I think it's one of those things where you have to know what you want to get out of it. So the only thing you need for a jam, just to back it up to the question, is a theme and a time limit.
At least one person.
Those are the things. So you don't necessarily need a physical space, but if you just decide on a theme, even some modifiers if you want to do a little bit extra, and then get some way for people to move their files around in a public way,
which you can now just do because itch now just has built-in game jam management stuff. So
people
you don't have to do anything really anymore to run a jam.
You just go to itch.io, click on the jams button, and create jam. And because then it posts it onto their calendar thing. And so what you'll find is if you go look at game jams on itch, you'll just see at any given moment there's like 40 of them just running all the time. So if you just throw yours into the pile, but then there's that question, just like publishing a game into a, when there's hundreds a day, nobody will notice. Well, how do you get people to then actually notice your jam and participate in it? Yeah, so of course, we just pull on our existing community.
Yeah, well, that's always what to do. So whether that community is a local thing or based around, in our case, the studio, or even based around something else entirely. So people have done jams for various pieces of technology, right? You have like a Unity jam or a Game Maker jam, whatever else.
Or maybe do it as a team building exercise for your company.
Maybe a level head jam.
Yeah, we definitely will do at some point. Yeah. So I think finding some community that you can tap into. Like, don't try to do a jam that's for everyone. That's the easiest way to not have anybody show up. Actually, make sure you pick a particular community to get it into. Pick a theme, pick a time frame, and then just put it on itch and call it good.
Yeah, and just put up some helpful. Make sure you try to anticipate all of the issues and questions that people will have as well. So having a FAQ or some kind of document that kind of explains things, and even just like one of the big things we found is that a really big proportion of people who participate in jams are first-time game developers. And they just thought, well, you know what? Screw it. Let's just do it. Let's just do it this weekend and see what happens. And so making sure that you have resources available for those people to know what kinds of tools to look into, and just how to approach it is super useful. And that makes sure that they have a really good time, and then maybe they'll come back if you do another one. So, all right, next question comes from Divo. You mentioned Levelhead feeling the best on mobile, but also had talked about multiplayer being at the core of certain levels. Are you guys working on implementing some ad hoc Bluetooth/Wi-Fi multiplayer for mobile devices? Or do you think mobile will be limited to single-player levels? Thanks again.
I don't know if we figured this out yet.
Well, we're not doing Wi-Fi
because that's just networking,
and so is Bluetooth. Yeah. As soon as you are having the game running on 2 separate devices,
Oh, I see.
then it's online.
It's now network play. It's
The only difference is the amount of lag compensation you would need.
and then whether or not we have to have servers running in the middle somewhere.
So the question is, can multiple controllers pair to a single?
I think they
device?
can.
Okay.
So on something like a Shield TV,
Mm-hmm.
you can have multiple Bluetooth controllers hooked up to it or whatever. So it is technically possible. It's really just a question of what kind of experience you want. Because like you could, maybe like hook a couple Bluetooth controllers up to an iPad and then like prop it up on a stand or something,
and then huddle around it real
and
quick.
huddle around it. But you could do that.
Well, I think it's one of those things that you see. Because you see it actually with Switches too, though, because it
is very
a small tablet.
Yeah, people still pack around those things.
Yeah, because it's fun, especially if you can just like. But the thing is, that the handles you can just like snap in half and give one to a friend.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Versus a phone.
people generally don't have a pair of iPad Bluetooth
I think
controllers.
almost nobody does. Really.
No, but this is something I was thinking about actually yesterday because I was playing The Legend of Zelda on the Switch, and then the controllers were about to die because I'd had them disconnected for like a couple of days. And so I was like, I'm just going to clock this in and I'm just going to take it with me, I guess. So I sling the controllers into the Switch, pick it up, and then just go into the bedroom where my wife's working, and then I'm just playing. I can just keep on playing in there.
Just like in the commercials.
Yeah, just like in the commercial. And then, but of course the screen's way smaller, but it looks beautiful on there. And the big thing is that having those externalized controllers is what allows that to happen.
Yeah.
Because having all the buttons on the screen. But I was thinking, is there not a way to just turn a phone into a controller? Is there not just a controller app
People have done this.
that you then just Bluetooth my phone to that phone?
Yeah,
and then
people have done this where you turn your phone into a controller, but it hasn't really taken off because phones have no tactile feedback and almost no games are
But
compatible
it's
with
not,
that.
it's not only that. It's also that you have to be operating then. You have to cause that device to respond to this application as if it is a controller, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Which is like some real low level operating system stuff on a.
Is it? Oh, that's what I was wondering because I don't know.
Yeah. Because
how
so
that
for example,
works.
we couldn't just like make another game maker application that's a controller and have it talk to this thing unless we were doing it over a network, right? We couldn't just directly do it sort of like operating system to operating system. We would have to basically have one of them acting like a server, setting up a thing, listening to this other application and so on. So we could do it.
So
It wouldn't be at all like it's behaving like a controller. It would just be like there's a second application.
yeah, and I mean, if you're like buying a copy of Levelhead on your iPad and then buying you're getting this like controller application on 4 different phones or what, like at this point, we're just flying off the rails so hard. You might as well just like get it on Steam or something, plug one of your controllers in and just do that. Yeah, and so I don't know.
But it is the case that a lot of people have phones and tablets, but not laptops these days.
Yes.
True.
At least at home, anyway.
True.
So yeah,
Yeah, we can't do anything for people who want to play same screen co-op on their iPad but don't have any Bluetooth controllers
yes,
or anything, right? Like at a certain point we have to just say there are features of the game that require certain things, and that's just kind of
So I mean,
it's a bummer, but that's just how it is.
Yeah, we still haven't actually explored the whole Bluetooth, multiple Bluetooth controllers for something like our iPads or tablets or we haven't actually explored it
We
yet.
think it's possible.
I think it's possible.
It's technically, I believe it is.
yeah. We don't plan to disable same screen co-op on mobile unless it seems like it's going to cause way more problems than it.
Yeah, I think the biggest difficulty we've had is with sort of the way that Game Maker, at least in the past, handled Bluetooth controllers, which is it would count a controller that was just paired as being active.
Oh, right.
Yeah, but actually we've got a whole new set of controller code which should probably take care of that. So it should be fine. All right, next question comes from Woland77. We all know that lying to your customers in marketing is scummy and probably illegal.
No,
I don't think
it's not as legal as
it's
you'd
illegal.
think.
And it's scummy though. But in game design, when is it important? When is it necessary to lie to your players? Not to obscure the truth or omit something, but to outright state something which is incorrect with the intention that the player believes something which is wrong.
In game design,
And when designing your gameplay, when do you
gameplay that feels good is 90% lies.
It's all lies.
So so I want to back this up. So there's actually
Games
a perfect GIF of this on the Levelhead subreddit, which shows what the collisions look like when your character in Levelhead jumps up and hits an object, hits a platform that's standing there, or falls down. And what's actually happening is that you as the player, so you have a sort of an imagined reality that you're living in while you play the game. And it's that
where you're good at stuff.
Exactly. You're very good at this game. You're able to squeeze into gaps. You're so precise, it's ridiculous.
You're great at jump. Like you never jump when it's too late. You know, it's all that good
But
stuff.
the reality is the game's doing a huge amount of work in the background using what we refer to as these forgiveness mechanics to make sure that what you think is happening mentally is what happens, as opposed to what should actually happen based on the fact that you are generally very bad at nearly every game you play. So
the game anticipates what your intention is.
Yes.
And then compensates for the fact that any person has about a 0.1 to 0.15 second delay in basically everything that they try to do.
Yeah.
Right?
So for example, when you're falling in Levelhead, you should not be able to jump when you haven't hit the ground yet.
Yep.
Which means that if you hit the jump button, say a pixel off the ground, so you haven't
Shouldn't work.
technically touched the ground, shouldn't work.
And actually, in games like the older Mario games, that is true.
Correct.
You have to wait until your character's feet touch the ground before you hit the jump button. Otherwise, nothing happens.
And the crazy thing about that is that that's true. Like that's very real, right?
That's the truth of the universe.
But the problem is it feels very bad.
It feels what people call unresponsive.
Yes.
Even though it is exactly responding to exactly what you are doing.
So what we do is we actually store,
You're the one who's unresponsive.
Yeah, that's true.
Or too responsive. in this case.
We store the jump input as you're falling.
Yep.
And if you hit the ground within a certain time frame after hitting the jump input, even if you're not on the ground yet, then you will jump when you hit the
Which
ground.
is basically similar to that, because human reaction time is roughly like 5 milliseconds. It's kind of how long it takes for your brain to figure out that a thing has happened in general. But of course, it depends on the thing.
Well, that's not
complexity
reaction
of it.
time. That's just that's input processing time. And then actually making a decision of converting that into action.
So
is
then
more
you
like
add on
0.1.
to that depending on.
Yeah, it's like a tenth of a second.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a perfect GIF that just shows what's actually happening behind the scenes to make it feel like your character is extremely responsive. So this happens it's literally every single game that you play that feels really good. 90% of it is
Lies.
Yeah.
So
and all the games that you play that don't feel good,
They're not
This is
lying.
probably
They're
why.
being really honest to you about how bad you are at the
absolutely.
game.
And we've talked about this before that I think I mentioned that quote from this gesture drawing for animation course, which was, there will be much rejoicing in the village when you learn to draw not the facts, but the truth. So the whole point in games is the same, which is it's not about being precise with sort of forcing the player to actually be really good at the game in terms of like knowing exactly when they hit the ground, exactly when
It's
they
about
jump.
making them have fun.
Yes. And those are two very different
Which
things.
is the point.
At the end of the day.
But this is also true of animation and also like CGI effects and these kinds of things. You know, there's all kinds of stuff that the reality actually seems less true than for whatever reason. Just in certain contexts, the reality doesn't feel right. So I think this is why I think it's like the original Jurassic Park with its basically puppet dinosaurs, right? Or one of the most recent new Star Wars movies where they had like there was like one of the intro scenes. There's this giant behemoth of a beast, right? And that thing is also not CGI. And those things, but it's like it feels very like stiff, you know, and kind of I don't know. It feels very weird, but it also seems like a very real creature versus something that's perfectly rendered, you know, like just top notch CGI or whatever, like, you know, perfect light cat, like everything is perfect about it, but it just moves a little too smoothly, you know?
Or gravity seems slightly
just slightly off
or
whatever.
when it's
But sometimes it
falling.
actually needs to, you know, so in order for something to be believable.
Yeah.
So there's this just weird relationship that we have where our perception about what should feel real and what shouldn't just doesn't actually match reality in a lot of context. So if you're creating an artificial reality, you have to identify the places where they need to match and where they need to not match to make sure that people have the experience that you're trying to have them have.
And this also applies to things like animation smears, which we're doing a lot of.
Yeah.
Where it's like, you know, you feel like that character is really sort of fluidly animated. It's like, no, that's 3 frames.
Yeah.
And just one of them is a weird smeary blur thing.
And then this is also the case when it comes to attack animations or anything like that. Exaggeration in animation is how you actually make something feel like it feels in the real world in a weird way. So if you have a spear, a character with a spear, they're trying to stab someone. If you just stop the spear exactly where the stab happens, it'll feel kind of stiff and dumb. But if you overshoot,
because in a lot of cases, like if you were to stab a person wearing armor with a spear, you know,
Probably pretty hard to do.
Yeah, best case scenario, it's going to get in there like an inch, right? Which
And now it's just kind of stuck in
and it's
there.
stuck in there, and then that's
that's not fun.
you know, then there's like a 5-minute sort of sort of gruesome struggle where you're trying to get it out of there.
Nobody's having a good time.
That's not good gameplay.
Especially the person with the spear in the chest in particular.
They're just like, ow, stop it.
Yeah, so there's a lot of this. Most of what makes these things feel good is it's just an illusion. It's 100% illusion. I think it's one of those things once you start building a couple of games, you recognize that the further you build this foundation of, say, movement code or whatever else, and then actually the way that it starts feeling good has nothing to do with that. It has to do with all the stuff that you put on top of that to make that illusion.
I also think that the true separation between good games and not good games is that understanding of where the lies need to be. Because you take something like Overwatch, right? Overwatch, if you ever go look up animations and look at freeze frames of all the various animation sequences, because that game is well known for having just fantastic animations, right? But it's all these crazy, hyper exaggerated lies where characters' bodies are contorting and stretching all these absurd ways that you don't notice because it all is happening so fast that it just feels good and right somehow. But if you freeze it, it looks terrible, right? But it's the same deal even with kind of going back to this whole multiplayer problem. In something like Overwatch, which is a really fast first-person shooter, but where there's lag everywhere. So between any two players, there might be as much as a quarter second of time between you taking an action and the other person being aware that action is happening. And in order for this to work, everybody's games have to be lying to each other constantly and just kind of guessing about what might have happened and whatever. And if you cannot make a good game, period, but certainly things that are like multiplayer where there's now lag involved and this kind of stuff, without just really knowing how to lie. And lying is incredibly complicated because when it comes to Levelhead, almost all of Seth's programming time has gone into figuring out where the lies need to be and then how to code them up, because the lies are way more complicated than the truth. The truth is just like, if the player's on the ground, they can now jump, right? Very straightforward, easy to program. But now it's, okay, now I need to store, anytime they're falling, I need to store whether or not they've tried to jump, and now I need to track time since they did that to see if it's within some arbitrary threshold that I also have to tweak to make sure that it feels right.
And then when they hit the ground, if they've pressed that button, then we just fire off another key press under the hood and be like, yep, you did it.
You totally did it.
Great job.
But the reality then is that if you look at, I think one of my favorite examples is this, if you look at a rotoscoped animation. So rotoscoping is just literally you take, say, a short video and frame by frame draw over the body.
Are you sure it's not when you look in a sewer?
That's roto-rooting.
Oh, right.
It's a different animation.
They're close together. Because what happens in rotoscoping is if you watch any of them, and they're kind of cool to look at, but they don't feel good. They don't feel good in a good animation.
They don't feel
sense.
juicy.
They don't feel juicy. They don't feel very lively, actually. But the weird thing is they're exact, right? It's just a person that you have drawn over 100% exactly, dancing or running or whatever else. And if you look at a few of these on YouTube, you can see that there's not nearly as much life in them as if you take, say, like some of Pixar stuff, but they're always just warping and bending and doing all sorts of weird shit, and they just don't feel nearly as good as something like that.
Yep. And it's easy to criticize things when they take these choices. So take almost every space movie, there's sounds in space, right? Yes. Now, this is the thing that back in the day used to drive me crazy because I was like, I'm a smart person.
Not real.
I know there's no sound in space. But the fact is, actually, most people don't know that, right? Which has nothing to do with intelligence or anything like that.
Yeah, well, and if you see X-Wing fighters or Vipers from Battlestar Galactica, and they have wings, and then they're swerving around like they're dogfighting in an airplane.
And then no sound is happening. It feels super unnatural to the point where even if you understand what's happening, it just still feels bad.
It's not fun.
There's one show that does not have sound in space, Firefly.
That's true.
It didn't make it.
They didn't
make it.
But on the other hand, though, the few times when I've seen that, or things that have a less just like stuff in space kind of thing, where they'll show an explosion but you don't hear anything, it's like offices you just see this. There's something about that moment that can be so spectacular because it's in contrast to everything else. But I was finishing up The Expanse over the weekend, and there was a scene where something terrible has happened to this person. I'm not going to go into any details, but. So she's just crying as this thing is happening, but now they're suspended in 0G, right? So I was looking at her eyes. I was like, "There's something weird about her eyes right now," because they were kind of like weirdly reflective. And then I realized that they were actually having her tears behave like water does in 0G.
Yeah, she was crying.
And so she was growing.
But the tears don't run down your face; they just
stick
stay
to your
on your eye.
Yeah. So she was just kind of like growing this water orb on her eyes, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, that is a good fucking piece of attention to detail, but. If you didn't know that in 0G that's how water behaved, This would just be like a baffling, confusing, like what the hell is going on kind
Is she
of
a
moment.
mage?
Right. That you couldn't appreciate. You would just think that something weird happened to the video or something, right? And so, because again, like the reality of how water behaves in space is so mismatched with a normal person's reality that you have to make a decision. Do I show the truth, or do I just have this person cry like a normal person on, because nobody would think about this except for that handful of people who really care.
Well, this is why, though, I think in that show in particular, they do a good job of bridging that gap, because basically when they have their engines running, then there's gravity, right? Because they're accelerating and then they're all pulled down to the deck. And so then they sort of simulate gravity by just accelerating, which means gravity is you accelerating downward. And so then they can contrast that by then they make a reference to, like, let's shut the engines off for a minute. And then all of a sudden everybody's floating and then things start behaving weirdly.
Yeah.
And so then you kind of get like, that's because of
something to do with
it's because of the gravity thing, right? But they also do stuff where they have sounds in space when it serves to convey what's happening. But then they don't pretend like the characters can hear it. Like you can hear it as the viewer,
right?
But like let's say the characters lose their radios and they're out in space, they have to touch their helmets together. So that when they speak, then the sound, the vibrations pass through.
And of course,
the
then it sounds beautiful and crystal clear to us.
When really it would sound like mumbled jargon.
Right.
I mean, even in the context.
You got to take the right kinds of liberties.
And they, of course, yell. Like they basically put their faces against each other and just yell into each other's faces.
Because the fact is, people don't care what's real. They just care about what feels real and feels good. And especially if you're telling a story, which is what we do with video games too, right? If you're telling a story, the most important thing is that somebody gets the story you're telling. It doesn't matter that you are absolutely 100% accurate, in your description of the events that are around that.
And usually exaggeration is the only way to get someone to get the point. That's the truth there. So going back to the rom-com example from earlier, I think we've even talked about the fact that a lot of the behaviors you see in sort of the traditional rom-coms are so stalkerish. Just they're so overblown in terms of like
horrifying
someone's behavior that, again, we've said before, if it was in any other context, you could put it in a thriller, and now it's like you change the music and it's horror, right?
Put some creepy music under it.
Yeah, and so, but in the context,
I've been writing you a letter every day for the past year.
You never answered.
That's bad. That's creepy.
So, but in that same way, when you're telling a story, the characters in a really good story tend to be either at a point in their lives where everything's kind of exaggerated because of what's going on. In terms of the activity level, the intensity of the crises that they're put into, or they're just exaggerated people by default. And so, like I'm sure we've all maybe met someone who feels a bit more like a movie character than a real person, because somehow they just are always sort of careening around in terms of like they're always just doing interesting, like doing more exaggerated things, more exaggerated life behaviors,
bombastic people.
Yeah, and they feel a little bit more characterful. And those are also the people who a lot of times, if you're writing a story, whatever else, you'll pull from memory from meeting this, crazy person you met at this thing, or this person who's doing these bajillion different things.
And of course, you're even embellishing that.
Yeah,
you would exaggerate all the different traits, all the things that they might be doing. Yeah, because exaggerations just make for a better story.
They do.
This is why people exaggerate when they tell stories, just kind of period.
Yeah,
right. Nobody ever tells just a story exactly as it happened.
Yeah. Well, I think that's an interesting point about the question, which is this idea of it being a lie. Because a lie has, of course, a lot of moral weight on it. They're calling it a lie. Calling it exaggeration or something like that is a different story.
It's just a description.
It still doesn't sound great.
Still doesn't sound great. But yeah, there's not a.
What if you call it a forgiveness mechanic?
It's a forgiveness mechanic.
That's pretty good.
Tell a story from what happened to me.
Because now we're forgiving the people we're lying to.
That's true.
It's a forgiveness mechanic. Yeah. So if you are like recounting a cool story from your vacation, when you come back and you want to share your experiences, you work in a couple forgiveness mechanics so that the story flows better, and so that as people, as they're more engaged with it, it happens as they might expect.
Yeah,
it's all about those forgiveness mechanics.
Well, every story you tell is only a slice of the actual thing that happened.
Yeah, it's already lies anyway.
Yeah, because the actual thing that happened is usually too long-winded or weird.
There's going to be a lot of context that's missing, so you're going to leave stuff out that doesn't really matter.
You couldn't have seen it from other people's viewpoints. You only have it from your own.
And you're probably misremembering it anyways. Yep. So it's already a lie, just kind of by the nature of it being a memory.
Yep.
Yeah. So, all right. Next question comes from Emu117. if one of you had to go on a really long road trip and could only take one brother, which would it be?
Why do people ask this
Keep
question?
giving them these like questions that try to pit us
against each other. This is a reality show situation. You know, the producer pulls one of us aside and is like, "Did you hear such and such was talking shit?"
I'm going to flatly refuse to answer this question.
I would just say whoever's available.
Yeah, which is actually
the most scheduling wise, I'd say scheduling wise, and then depending on just like whether or not the type of trip was something that they would be interested in.
Yeah,
because it's not that I like hanging out with either one of you more than the other. It's that.
Oh wait, no, this is a trick question.
Replaceable.
If you were going on a really long road trip and can only take one brother, it would be yourself.
Nice. Just sort of by definition.
Because as soon as there's a second one, now you've taken two brothers.
Yep.
Who's you? Was it the car?
The car in this scenario.
Who's taking us?
What?
You take yourself?
Yeah, well, because you are.
That is how
you are
would
one
say
of.
it.
Yeah, because if you have a sibling, you are a brother.
Yep.
Right.
That's true.
Yeah, but you don't say like I took my brother.
It doesn't. Yeah. So it says if you can only take one brother,
One
right?
of the
I'm
three.
with you.
Uh-huh.
Right. Then as soon as
you're taking one,
as soon as you
take yourself, you have done this.
Right. You've already taken one brother on the road trip. Now, if you take a sibling who is male, then you have now taken two brothers on a road trip. Right.
That's true.
Yep.
Anytime you go on a road trip, you take yourself on a road trip. Right?
Typically.
And you just are who you are.
That's true.
So
Most of the time.
So there you go. That's the answer. One trick question. He thought he could get it past us. I don't think so. Yeah. All right, next question comes from Mart. No description of what kind of Mart. So we'll just
a general
store. I'm a huge fan of Seth's Saturday morning cartoon streams. I'm also in Central Time and usually miss the first half due to that pesky sleeping thing. How do y'all wake up so early?
Good question.
You just so one trick, the trick that I use is just to sleep poorly. So that when I'm asleep, it's kind of all the same,
It's just kind of blurry,
drifting through consciousness.
Yeah,
it's questionable.
Well, I want to get at the framing of this question, which is you're making a judgment about different parts of the day, right? So you said like 8:00 a.m. is early, and as soon as you say that, then you've sort of made a decision about
you don't want to get up early.
Nobody wants to wake up early, right? And if you're describing the mid-morning as early, which is what 8 a.m. is, then, and actually if you can only get in halfway, and then you're talking about 10 a.m. being early as well, then you've already made a decision that that's an unreasonable time to wake up.
Which to me, like, because my question goes the other way, which is, how do people get up at 10?
Yeah, every time I nowadays sleeping in for me is getting up at 7.
For me, it's 8.
Yeah.
But it just depends on your routine. Because the thing is, like, it 100% depends on your routine. So the way that I managed to switch mine, because I used to wake up closer to 9 or so. The way I switched mine was just by routinely setting an alarm and then also practicing good sleep hygiene the night before. Because that was actually the thing that was always fucking me up. Because I always wanted to get up quote early so that I could get more stuff in before sort of the day had really kind of gotten going. But the biggest thing that I'd heard with was not like setting an alarm and forcing myself out of bed in the morning. It was forcing myself into bed at night because I always had stuff that I wanted to do. And for some reason, it just seemed like the time to do it was instead of sleeping at night. So the biggest thing about getting up in the morning is actually not about getting up in the morning. It's about going to bed in the evening. So if you sort of move the focus of your routines and stuff to having that good sleep hygiene before bed, which is like, don't be playing on your Switch in bed 30 minutes before. So I did that, but don't do that. Make sure if you have a plan for the next day, make sure you write out before you get up in the morning, that sort of thing. So that's kind of the trick that I use.
I think there's also a level of honesty you have to have with yourself about what you're doing. Because if you're talking about like, oh, there's stuff I want to get done before I go to bed, that stuff is like if you're doing stuff at like 11:30 p.m., it's almost never worth doing. Well, like a lot of times it's I'll wrap up one more episode of this show on Netflix. Right. Like I'll wrap up. I got to look through 49 more Reddit threads or whatever. And because like what people tend to do before bed is mindless stuff because they're tired. Yeah. Right. And so they're just kind of like filling the time with these sort of things that just kind of string you along.
Yeah. This is why the morning is a good time to do your important work.
I also like to read nonfiction when I get in bed because it can be really interesting, but it doesn't matter how interesting nonfiction is.
It puts you out.
It's not a story.
Yep.
Well, I guess unless it's a story-based one. So like, don't read about really interesting characters that were real-life characters,
Right.
you know.
You
But,
got to find some boring books.
yeah, but not too boring. But just like
Medium boring.
medium boring, exactly. So yeah. So
About interesting things, but portrayed boringly.
yeah, exactly.
Like a textbook.
Or vice versa. Either way. Because if I go to bed and just start reading those things, just 20 minutes in or so, I'm already really struggling to stay awake.
Mm.
And then if I force myself basically to get to the end of the chapter or something, so I'm just barely cognitively almost gone, and I just lights are already off, and then I just put the book down and just lay down and go to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And as with all things, when it comes to messing up your sleep, if you're staying up late to try to get more stuff done, the bill comes due,
Yeah.
right? So you're
Just like coffee.
yeah,
I think that's what I
you're trying to
realized,
get more
too.
stuff done tonight in exchange for not getting as much stuff done. And the more you're not adding time to your life.
Correct.
You're just moving it because you still have to sleep
Sometime.
for some amount of time, right?
Mhm.
And so if you shift that forward 6 hours or something because you stayed up super late, you haven't gained it. You actually just lost a lot because now you're just fucked up the next day.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, you're right. It's routine.
It's mainly about going to bed, honestly. It's like 90% of it's going to bed.
Well, it also is part of what you value for just what you're doing during your day. Because if you're going out late if you're friends with people who love going out late,
Mhm.
then you're just kind of fucked because
Well, yeah,
people are
that's
out
a-
late all the
Well,
time.
and
right?
yeah, in that case, you have gained that,
yeah,
right?
right.
You've gained.
But you're fucked with respect to waking up early.
Yes, you've made an exchange.
You've made it, and then that makes sense and is fine. You've just kind of offset, your
Mm-hmm.
hours. For me, like the reason because I used to not wake up until probably 9 when I was, like a teenager and could get away with it, And in college, I would also kind of try to sleep in until
You always try to pick
9 or 10
classes that
even.
start at noon, so I can get up at 11, and then you'd be up until.
Actually, for me, a
4.
lot of my classes, because I was taking all these weird classes that there was only one of, and I really wanted to take. So I actually had a lot of really early morning classes, which is what started to train me out of that. But a lot of it is like the morning when the sun has just come up a bit. So I don't like coming up with the sunrise necessarily. But if the sun's like only been up for a little while, so it's still even the middle of the summer, it's not a jillion degrees. People aren't really out yet.
Mm-hmm.
Mosquitoes aren't really out yet. It's just kind of it is the best time of the whole day in terms of just
nice.
the ambiance of the universe at that time. And if you just stay asleep for an extra hour, you just miss it. You miss the best part of
the
the day.
magic hour.
It's just gone.
Yeah,
I think so much of it though just has to do with the fact that if you figure out how to sleep effectively, then when you wake up, you actually feel good, which I know is like a mind blowing thing.
So
'Cause,
things like white noise, blackout curtains.
earplugs. My wife and I've been wearing earplugs because our dog every so often will just like get off the bed and just like just walk around a little bit. Apparently midnight sort of jog situation in the bedroom, and he's got these toenails and they just sort of click clack on the floor, and so we didn't realize it, but we had slowly just sort of not been sleeping because our dog just occasionally gets up and walks around a little bit, and so we got earplugs. And both of us been sleeping like babies now.
Yeah, earplugs are very helpful.
They're
But
phenomenal.
I have what do you call it? I have one of those like high pitched
Mhm.
ear noise
Tinnitus?
thing, tinnitus, just like a little bit in my left ear, which I don't notice unless it's quiet, like really, really quiet. And so normally there's white noise everywhere I go in the whole universe because we live in a city, right? So you can't go anywhere and not have noise. But when my wife and I were on a trip a few weeks ago, we were on a boat somewhere in the middle of a rural place.
and all you hear is
There's just nothing. And then I
no.
put in earplugs because it's like kind of creaks and stuff.
Yeah.
So I was trying to sleep. So I had my earplugs in, and all of a sudden, like it felt really loud. This screaming noise, And I was like, oh fuck, maybe I can't have silence.
you gotta have the white noise.
I need white noise earplugs, which I don't know if those exist.
I guess you could just
should.
get headphones and play white, like
Yeah.
earbuds.
Yeah.
Get those weird
those-
Apple ones
but then
that
you
look
can't-
like cigarettes
but
hanging
then-
out of your ears.
But then you can't roll to your side,
Oh yeah,
I
because
know.
they're hard.
because they're
Yeah.
hard.
You got to sleep on your back.
Yeah.
But the funny thing is, every so often I wake up and I just rip one out of my ear because of course they're mildly uncomfortable.
Oh, yeah,
so every
they're
so
not
often you'll wake up and for whatever reason
You're
just
just
sort
like,
of in
fuck
your
this.
in your like zombie state. So Diana said she woke up the other night and like hers is a retainer. She woke up just holding her retainer straight up in the air because it's one of those things. Like at some
You
point
instinctively
you're like,
rip things off.
get
of
it off
yourself.
me.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So yeah, and also I think people also have a weird behavior toward their weekends,
Yeah.
which is
Which we have discussed as that's when you become weak.
that's when you become weakened because you fuck up all your routines for the
Yeah.
sake of freedom, right? Like this is your time where you're like, nobody can tell me what to do.
Not even myself.
Now I'm gonna fuck up all the things that I've done right this week.
I'm gonna drink too hard.
I'm gonna
stay up too
drink.
late.
I'm gonna
wake
stay up until
late.
3. I'm gonna get up at noon. I'm gonna be in a panic because I don't have enough time all of a sudden. Then I'm gonna capitalize on that panic by taking a nap because of how overwhelmed I am.
Yeah.
Then at 6 p.m. I'm gonna be like, oh God, I feel terrible. I'm gonna go out partying to kind of make myself feel better. Stay up until 4 again. And then you're like, oh God, it's Monday soon. The weekend's just beginning. I hate Mondays. Then you sort of fuck up the rest of your Sunday just in various ways.
Yeah, I think if you think about weekending as a hobby that you can do, it's like kayaking, you know? It's like drawing. It's like weekending is just a thing that you can learn how to do more effectively.
Because you got a 48-hour chunk of time that you could do awesome stuff with if you just didn't fuck up your
routines.
Everything.
Usually it's just the routines.
Yeah.
So
making good food for yourself. So you got to take the Queer Eye approach because like what they do is they come into people's lives who are basically in shambles,
which is most people on weekends.
Yeah, definitely most people on weekends.
No matter how ordered your life is during the work week, it's because somebody else is making you do it. And then as soon as the weekend hits, you're like, I'm done. So what they do is they're like, you got to make sure you're dressing well, right?
Put some lotion on your face.
Put some lotion on your face.
Yeah.
You got to make sure your house is in order. You got to cook yourself some good food, and you got to learn about other people, right? And so those are like the 5 pillars of the Queer Eye show. Just apply those. Apply those to your weekend. Like, I'm going to take care of myself, make sure my house is in order, make sure my health is good, eat some good food, and then everything else will be fine.
Yep.
You know?
Get some culture.
Because it's amazing because they come in and they do those 5 things, which is just those things to me go into the umbrella of just take care of yourself. As soon as they do those 5 things, all of a sudden this person's life is completely transformed. Everything about their life, you know, they get the promotion, they get all this stuff. And actually, it's like that book, The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up. Right? I was like, that's basically the book form of Queer Eye.
Yeah.
Like the book makes you go through all of your stuff and just get rid of shit that is sort of bad for you. Yeah. Right? And it makes you rethink all your routines. So
to me, one of the most important things is to wear real person clothes. If you're sitting around in gym shorts,
on
like
your weekend,
pajamas,
unless you're like
or
mowing or gardening or doing something.
I mean, again, if you've decided I'm going to pajama this weekend, then cool.
If that's part of your hobby, just understand that you've decided to be slovenly, right? Which can be fine. That's a thing we can all do.
But what you've done is you've added inertia to doing anything other than
because you can't go anywhere. You can't do anything because now I got to put clothes on.
As soon as you need to go take care of real adult things, go to the bank, go to the grocery store, whatever. Now you've added a barrier of discomfort.
Yeah, I just think the most effective thing, like the first thing I do, so I get up, have my coffee, put on clothes. Or I can shower and then put on clothes, but whatever, you know, whichever order depending on the day.
First thing I do is I put clothes on, then take a shower in coffee.
In coffee,
It's
sort of it's metaphorically accurate.
I want it to soak into my shirt, and so that way I can absorb it through my skin like a toad.
Yeah,
as the day progresses.
Yeah, but it's one of those things.
It's a slow drip.
It's one of those things that kind of like just wearing pajamas, for example, to me is the same kind of quote unquote freedom that you take like on the weekend where you just let your life run off the rails, you know, because like, now you're comfortable in terms of what you're wearing, in terms of how it feels touching your skin.
You are comfortable in the short term.
Yeah.
Like in the immediate sense of the word.
But you've introduced all these new costs and all these new sort of behavioral triggers. Because a behavioral trigger when you're wearing pajamas is like, I'm fucking around now.
I'm lounging.
I'm lounging. I'm sleeping.
Nobody's going to make me do anything useful.
Yeah. I'm not going anywhere.
I can't even go outside.
I can't even get the mail right now. That would be embarrassing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that sleep schedule thing is especially important as well because like people go, oh, it's the weekend, I'm going to sleep in. Well, you know what sleeping in really means? It means staying up late, right? I mean, because it means
even if it doesn't mean staying up late because you're like catching up, it means breaking whatever your routines are.
Yeah. And something that I always found totally fascinating is people's hatred of Mondays.
Yeah,
right. Because I've never felt bad about it being Monday.
What about when you worked your Busch Stadium or whatever your stadium job? Selling hot dogs and stuff.
There was no such thing as Monday because people play baseball just whenever they play baseball. So I had no work week. But
did you dread going to work though?
No. But I think I think a big part of it is like, why do people hate Mondays? It's because that's when the bill comes due for all the fucking around you.
You know, it's right. Now that you mentioned that, I'm pretty sure there's a study on sort of like weekly death rates for each day of the week, and Mondays get a spike. And the question is like, why?
Everybody's tired.
Wait, what kinds of deaths? Like accidental
No,
deaths?
I think it's like heart related, like heart attacks and that sort of thing. Just sort of like your general people die and stuff.
But not like car accidents.
Not car accidents.
Okay.
And things. Though that one does spike after the time switch thing from daylight savings.
Yes.
So, but Mondays apparently, because essentially what happens is everyone's routine.
Wait a minute, hold on.
Wacky, and then
So
people die
daylight
on Monday
savings time is killing people?
It
Yes.
does, yeah.
I knew it.
because it messes with people's sleep usually the night before.
So then they're tired and they're
then
probably
they're driving.
rushing to work because they
so there's
missed
more
it.
car accidents.
So you've got a bunch of
Monday.
tired, stressed people frantically trying to get to work as fast as possible. Anyway, sorry, back to your point.
I mean, I
I
already
had
said
to-
it, which is that the Monday morning, because it's a shift, the stress of shifting your routine is it has a
It
physiological
causes
consequence.
physical stress, yeah.
So when you shift from Sundays into Mondays, part of the reason you probably hate it is because if your routine is that different, then you're literally causing yourself some good physiological stress.
You're giving yourself a heart attack.
Yes.
Damn.
And it's way easier to come into a weekend and fucking up your schedule in your life is really easy.
Oh, so easy.
But putting it back in order
Takes a effort.
is very difficult.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, so that's what gives you the mistaken belief that you feel great going into the weekend with all this freedom, and that Monday is the problem. When
Without
really,
realizing
it was you the problem. the
without
whole time.
realizing that the reason you feel great coming into the weekend is because somebody else has been making you keep your shit together for 5 days.
Yeah.
That's why you feel so good on Friday night.
This is the thing. Consistency is key. Going back to the podcast.
Consistency. As soon as you miss a day, all of your bodily functions unsubscribe.
Give
They're like, I'm out. I don't know what's happening. I don't want to be a part of this anymore.
Yeah.
Then you have a heart attack.
But it's
on
true.
Monday.
Once I switched over to a consistent schedule, so because basically during the work week I get up between 6:30 and 7. On the weekends I get up between 7 and 7:30. It's just like a very minor shift. And once I switched to that from this really wacky
keeping
schedule,
it pretty tight.
keep it really tight, and it's mostly on weekends I just worry a little bit less about what my alarm clock is doing. So the alarm clock's still set for the same time, still set for 6:30. It's just that.
But you're still going to bed on time, planning to get up at
Exactly.
that time.
And then but then if I'm just like, I just want to lay here a bit longer, then I just do it because it's the weekend.
But because it took me a long time to get over that also, that idea of being on a schedule,
oh yeah, that's true. You did have a
Yeah, I hated it because I was like,
That was somebody telling you what to do.
Yeah. I hate
even
being
if
told
it's
what to do.
just the universe
Or yourself.
Or myself.
telling you what to do.
So, but no, I think it's an interesting thing where it is very much this it's like, don't chain me down to a schedule.
Well,
Yeah.
it's placing an extreme amount of value on freedom without placing any value on structure or on what you're even going to do with that freedom.
Yeah.
Right?
And I think that as we talk about a lot, the truth of the matter is that behaviors, like, because you're just not on autopilot all the time, basically, like just people are, right? And you can be on autopilot in bad ways, where all your bad behaviors. That's actually what people mean by freedom. It's just you sort of avoid all of the
Duties.
behaviors, all of your duties that are actually.
Well, I think importantly,
useful.
most autopilot behaviors are bad ones.
They are, yeah.
Because bad things that are generally bad for you are things that feel the best in the short term,
Right.
which are the things your brain tends to like.
So if you go
make
for
you do.
complete freedom, that just means like I can't tell me what to do. Nobody can tell me what to do. I'm going to go on autopilot.
I'm in my pajamas.
I'm in my pajamas. I'm eating ice cream. That's all I'm doing. Just those two things. Then
Yes.
yeah, it's not good for you.
It's not good.
And again,
Embrace it.
This isn't about saying don't relax. This is just about
No, to me, it's about redefining what relaxing means.
Relaxing means not being stressed out all the fucking time because your life is in shambles.
Yeah,
yes.
being relaxed isn't about what you're doing. It's about how you feel.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Because I relax 100% of the time, no matter what I'm doing. So I'll be in here for on a work day when like the whole world is falling apart. Like I pushed out some bug onto the server or something. And I was like, well, that was dumb. And I'm like in there fixing it as fast as possible because I'm like, I want to fix it and I'm worried about it, But I feel great the whole time.
Like, I'll get it fixed. It's fine.
whatever.
Everything's fine.
Things are fine.
Things are fine.
Things are fun. Yeah. So,
that's a good note to end on.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Just relax.
Well, we'd like to thank our producer, Fat Bard, for making us sound good. Thanks to our community moderators who keep our Discord running. If you'd like to get more involved in the Butterscotch community, you can hop into the Discord server, which is over at discord.gg/bscotch, and come say hello. Also, as mentioned earlier, we do have a new Levelhead subreddit over at reddit.com/r/levelhead. So if you want to kind of get in on the conversation about the game, leading up to launch, then get on in there. Also, if you'd like to adorn your body with Butterscotch merch, we have a shop over at shop.bscotch.net. Or if you'd like to send us something, we have a mailbox, which you can find the address for over at mailbox.bscotch.net. And last but not least, if you'd like to help support the podcast and buy us a cup of coffee, go on over to moneygrab.bscotch.net. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.